Hi, welcome. My name is Dale McCluskey, and on this video, I'm going to be providing insight into the concept that is commonly referred to as conditioning, and with shaping, which aligns with that concept. And I'm going to be discussing why it is that it's really important to make sure you get the relationship right before applying certain concepts. And again, this video I believe will be extremely valuable and helpful for those who are trying to navigate within this learning narrative with understanding how it is that certain things such as service dog, even police working dogs, those who are applying this concept to get a desired response, how it is that things can be very inconsistent and kind of come off the rails, so to speak, when it comes to achieving a consistent and desired response from a dog for a task-specific, thing that you're getting the dog or desiring the dog to do. Now, here's the thing to, again, understand about what really matters is understanding the sequencing. Again, I talk about sequencing, how it is, this system of training, how it approaches it. It separates the process. It identifies the process correctly by approaching the process as a relational changing process. And in fact, I'll type that right in here right now so people can see. Changing process versus learning based, okay? Now again, this is where there's a lot of confusion as to the process of training. And again, I show a direct correlation between the inherent problems that go along with working within the parameters of approaching training as a learning-based process, especially, okay, this is key, once behavioral issues are already underway. Okay, once a dog has already gained a level of control in the relationship, and you enter into the process as a learning-based process, the negative impact that learning narrative plays in regard to expectations. And considering the fact that there's a major picture problem as it relates to how things can appear within the training environment and certain interactions based on response alone, okay, without putting response into relational context and considering both the type of influence being established between dogs and owners, the motives of the dog, and also these issues related to control. Okay, so this is really the main problem here as it relates to why it is that when you apply certain concepts, okay, in a very kind of a one-dimensional way, how it is that you may not get a desired response. The dog can continue to hold control, and therefore things will fall apart. Because again, what I show is the relational glue that holds everything together is just that. It's about relationship. It's about getting the relationship right first between dog and owner. But again, this is where you get into this issue of the process, understanding dogs as the social relational animals that they really are, and how the decision-making process is governed at that level. So again, really important to understand what's working in the background. Again, I brought in this diagram here, which is on a couple of my other technical videos, which goes through the dynamics, how these dynamics are working, okay, in the background, and can actually cause people issues as it relates to outcomes. Okay, so always consider that when you're applying a concept, whether it's conditioning or shaping, and you're going through this, again, the premise here is through repetition, okay, rewarding a dog on a desired response and shaping that, building a bridge that way, that again, what this learning narrative does, it assumes a certain default state of mind, a like-minded state of mind, that just because you're getting a response by working within the parameters of this learning-based narrative, that this desired response represents meaningful influence, that the owner has meaningful influence, that the motives of the dog are aligning, and that's not necessarily the case at all. In fact, you won't hear trainers talking the way I'm talking about control, motives, and that, in fact, is the problem. In fact, you want to put that into your basic formula, so to speak. So anytime you're working with a certain concept, just understand everything filters through relationally. It's about relationship. It's about understanding dogs as social, relational animals. And the examples, again, you can apply this into the human setting when, say, dealing with, say, a selfish child and applying a type of a promoting change at a very superficial level. Some, a so-called professional stepping on the scene, applying a certain concept, reward-based concept, and trying to build off of that and promote that as meaningful, when in reality the child may just be going through the motions and doing something, but still their thinking processes haven't really changed. They have no respect for the parent, and as in this case here, the dog's still holding control, even though at times it appears as though you're getting a desired response, okay, or things are coming together a certain way. Now, the other thing to understand here, or you have to put into the equation here too, is the human element. Okay, the human. I'll type this in, and this issue about the natural alignment. Okay, where again, this is kind of what I call the wild card, but it's very intentional. You can see how this happens. So, for example, the starting point is can be working within this narrative. Some people like myself and others can get away with working directly within this narrative without being intentional about the process, and you will get to the desired response based on relational change actually happening to this narrative based on this dynamic. And this is outlined down here. You see the human factor here. Okay, you always have to take that into consideration. I have lines going here to represent levels. So you get an idea these levels will change, and they affect the outcomes. As these levels change, the dog's relational needs, the level of control the dog's holding in the relationship, the human, okay, your thinking processes, how you're connecting, interacting, and control issues that are manifesting. And here's the key here, is the method itself is specific to change, which means that the method, okay, from the beginning has to be intentional when it comes to the process of change. So it has to kind of meet the relationship where it is at. Okay, so for example, if you have behavior issues already happening, okay, in the relationship, that means that the process has to be specific to what's happening, which means that it has to take on the form of a relational changing process, okay? It means that if you work within the learning-based narrative, again, the dog can hold control even while they're going through the motions, okay? As the picture's building, everything can look great, and it's not great at all, okay? So again, the same holds true. Everything I'm saying holds true to certain concepts such as conditioning, shaping, okay? You have to put the issue of control and motives and relationship into that equation. You need to get the relationship right first, but the context here of the method, again, within this system, it uses a relational changing method, again, to change the relationship where it's at in terms of the process. So what it does is it takes this learning narrative out of the sequence, okay? So it removes the learning narrative out of that sequence, out of the process, and it approaches the process for what it truly represents. So it frames it up, so the methodology is specific, okay, when it comes to change. So it's about understanding the role that influence plays. Again, I make the distinction between corrective and relational influence and how that ties into the methodology, okay, in terms of the dog coming into agreement with, again, and that is, in fact, becomes the motivator. Okay, so again, when people are looking for, scrambling around trying to find a motivator, that's very problematic because, again, when the dog has control, a certain level of control, and you step into a process that works within this learning-based narrative, the motivator can be control itself. Okay, that's just by default. Okay, so which can, again, paint up a counterfeit picture. So you have to be very aware that you could be dealing with a counterfeit picture, either a whole or a part of a counterfeit picture, and not even know that you're dealing with a counterfeit based on, again, how people look at just at the response level. So again, but again, the question here is, but again, the look at it is about proper sequencing. Okay, again, this system, how I approach training, I make sure that it follows the proper sequencing through the process. The process has to take on the right, framework and approach it correctly in order to make sure that relational change happens. And make sure you're not going to be dealing with issues of control issues. And again, this is where problems all start. Once you start to work off of certain concepts without understanding how these dynamics play off each other, you can end up with a lot of problems, okay? And then, again, what happens is the focus gets shifted somewhere else, typically onto the dog as the problem. And it's really important you have to take it back and you have to fix the relationship first. You have to and that's where focus comes in too. When people talk about creating focus with the dog focusing on what you want, that is established through the correct process. Okay, the dog starts to focus in on what you want based on the right type of influence happening between dog and owner. Even when you look at commands themselves, the right type of influence has to come into play, which is associate the verbal commands. But that happens again through the process. And so when I'm undertaking the process, I don't use commands for a couple weeks, and then once a meaningful influence begins to take hold through the process and associate to the person, changing the perceptions from the dog to the person, then you start to associate commands and see everything lines up, because again, it's all about proper sequencing. Okay, understanding there's like a formula. You have to go through the formula. And the question can be is, okay, Dale, okay, I understand about the process, getting the process right, making sure that's established first, okay, to make sure not dealing with control issues so that this becomes a problem, okay, because you're not going to have the desired response. You might get a response, but it's going to be consistent. It's going to be based on meaningful influence. It's going to fall apart at times. Okay, so I understand. I get the process right. And then, but how does this fit in? Because the question is, well, Dale, is there such a thing as learning? Absolutely. Okay, I mean, it's not something I've mentioned on many of my videos yet, but absolutely. But again, it follows a sequence. So after you get the relationship right, meaningful influence takes hold and all that, then the fun stuff begins. Because people look at my stuff and say, well, this doesn't look like it's very much fun. This is like work, and it's like people will try to label this as adversive and all this stuff. Well, listen, this is the thing about getting real about, where people are at. It's about having a relationship problem. Okay? It's just like having a parenting problem. You have to go through some of the hard stuff that maybe you don't like. You have to confront. And when I say confront, it's about what's reasonable. It's not meant to be over the top at all. So this whole methodology follows the parameters of the balanced parenting approach. This is not a balanced training system way balance is defined in dog training world within that learning narrative. It follows, comes into follows the right path as nature defines change with how a dog's decision-making process is governed and how it's shared through the connection that's shared at that level, socially, at the social relational level with other dogs and with the human. Okay, so, but again, you have to default back to understand getting the relationship right first. The process is really important. Now, here's the problem here. 99% of all dog trainers out there have aligned themselves with this learning narrative out of the starting gate, regardless of whether they've incorporated corrections in, certain devices in. Okay, I show why that in the mix, okay, is a major problem by way of people entering a process. A dog has a certain level of control, and how this gets in the way. It interferes in the relational changing process. Okay, it really does. This needs to be removed. Okay, then we can be very intentional about making sure relational change happens. Then, like I said, then the fun stuff can happen, and this is where this narrative here can come online. Okay, reward then isn't a problem. It's like marking. Okay, it's just like you're shaping and all those things. Absolutely. But the problem in the dog training world is people are working within the parameters of this when they haven't even got the relationship right first. Okay, just understand that's the main problem, and not understanding when you put this learning narrative in the mix and you align that way with an assumed state of mind based on response. Okay, you're not going to have a desired outcome, even if you're trying to diminish unwanted behavior. Okay, regardless of whether you want to establish a task-specific response. by way of, say, a service dog or police or working dog standard, whatever. You have to get the relationship right first. But again, this is where you have to default back to the process. You have to get the process right. Okay, so the methodology is critical. And so I'd encourage you to take a look at the method that this system promotes. It approaches it differently than any other system out there. It's very intentional with making sure relational change happens. And so again, it's all about getting a desired outcome. Okay, that's what everybody wants. I mean, people want a consistent, say, service dog standard. They want a outstanding, say, police dog standard. They want all those things, but you have to get the relationship right first. And here's the thing: this system is not about, you talk about the context of, and this is about labels out there, that people have become so entrenched in this idea about what training represents through this learning narrative. It's gotten very twisted. And so people can't kind of step back from it, but I would encourage you to do that. And again, just apply my example I use when it comes to parenting. If you're dealing with a very selfish child and you start to apply this type of superficial, reward system to motivate, what's the typical outcome? But it almost aligns perfectly with what's happening in the dog training world. So it's about what's reasonable. Dogs understand. They come into agreement with. They're happy, okay? They're very content because you're coming into harmony with nature. In fact, the bond that you establish with your dog is actually, there's more depth to it, okay? You're going to get so much more out of the relationship. You're going to be able to understand certain concepts so much better, how they're applied and all those different things. And again, if you're looking at even being able to take the system of training, because this is almost like rewriting the rule book, okay, on what training represents, which is what it is. I want people to understand I'm showing exactly what's going on, so there's real depth here. But if you're desiring or wanting to be able to take the system of training and apply it into a real world application, I have trainers courses available, and I would encourage you to check them out. They're a 2-week course. They're going to give you, they're going to help you reconcile everything. They're going to give you the framework, this relational framework to work off of. And the great thing is when you sit down with dog owners, it's going to make sense to them. You're going to explain not just going through the motions of something, but the reasons why, why you're doing whatever you're doing. And in these concepts too, you're going to be very intentional and you're going to be very confident in knowing the outcomes. Okay, because right from the start, you're going to understand what the process represents and how all these concepts align. So again, I encourage you to check out my website. Lots of great information, lots of training options available for dog owners. And even if you want to take the system as a trainer and be able to help others, that option's there as well. So thanks for watching.